against Creole exceptionalism. You know, in fact, I'm Creole exceptionalism, that name, that is not John McWhorter's label. John McWhorter did not call it Creole exceptionalism. In fact, Michel de Graff used that term, Creole exceptionalism, as something of a slur, something of an insult to John McWhorter. You might say, well, why? What's so sort of what was the intent? Why is it considered an insult? Okay, you may have heard the word. Now, remember, these are all scholars that are working in the United States, all right? And they're in the United States. You may have heard of this movement, the Make America Great Again and Trump. And what is usually how they are described and what they talk about is American exceptionalism. Now, to take that sort of usage, American exceptionalism, which is sort of used to indicate America is the exclusively the greatest country in the world, all right? That idea, which is considered to be very super nationalistic and sort of very, very chauvinistic, and take that term and apply it to what John McWhorter is talking about. In a way, almost saying that John McWhorter is in some ways almost racist, that he is taking a view of Creoles which as some sort of racist, colonialist ideology behind it. Now, that's sort of what de Graaf intended. He used the term to really to insult John McWhorter and John McWhorter's view. We'll see more about that in a moment. But I just wanted you to understand the use of the term. At first, you might think, well, Creole exceptionalism. In fact, John McWhorter, after that, took that term, Creole exceptionalism, and said, okay, you wanted to insult me by this, but in fact, it really does express what I'm trying to say. And that is that Creoles are a new language all their own. They are exceptional. They are not like other languages. So that's sort of how the debate has been going on. All right, so de Graaf, his argument against McWhorter. Creoles can be defined in socio-historical terms, not in structural linguistic terms. They are not linguistically definable. Colonialist ideology, sort of a racist ideology, frames Creoles in opposition to normal languages. He's saying, okay, these colonialists were sort of saying, oh, these Creoles, they're special, all right? And not in a nice way. They're broken English. They are non-standard, primitive, all right? So because they're simplified, using that as a way to sort of put down in the language and its speakers. The view that Creoles recapitulate the early evolution of language frames Creole speakers as pre-hominids. This is the other point. De Graaf is saying, if you say my language is simple, if you're saying that I speak a Creole, and therefore that Creole is something that is almost like pre-language, it's different, not just different, it's simplified to the extent that it almost suggests that I am on the evolutionary scale somewhere very much earlier on, okay? Insulted. He's insulted, all right? He's insulted by John McWhorter's idea, and we'll see a bit more why that's the case. He's also, to Mufwene. Mufwene is from the University of Chicago. Uniformitarian hypothesis, basically the same as de Graaf. Creoles are contact languages. They're brought in languages in contact with each other. They're not developed out of pidgins. And the fact that Creoles have certain features, well, that's used because when the first learner of that, the first L1 learner trying to learn the L2 had certain sort of characteristics of the language, and that have carried on from generation to generation. The quarter, Creole exceptionalism will use the term. The quarter, in fact, has taken on the term himself. Pidgins develop into Creoles. A break in transmission leads to the loss of superfluous complexity. Creole prototype emerges. So there's all that old complexity of these old languages, all those old artifacts in the language, they can be done away with. A little bit more on Mufwene's uniformitarian hypothesis. They're spoken in different parts of the world. They resulted from sporadic trade contact. They're the result of repeated cycles of adult acquisition of an L2. So a first group of enslaved people, this is the founder group, founders of the Creole. They learn a variety of English. Newly arriving groups of enslaved people learn from the first group, and so on. Also, the role of children is limited. The quarter, when adult L2 learners create a pidgin, they put aside those features they consider unnecessary. So what's missing? Inflection is missing. Tone is missing. Lexicalization is missing. And even when known input languages have complex features in one area of grammar, the resulting Creole will reduce that complexity. And the ideal example is Palenquero, where Kikonga and Spanish, both highly inflected. If you're going to argue that these two languages came in contact with each other, how is it that two highly inflected languages, the Creole that results from this, has no inflections? What happened? If it was two languages in contact, shouldn't they sort of exhibit the properties that those two languages shared, but now do not? Well, that's a pretty strong argument for McWhorter's position. Okay, again, this is the QR code for the video. This is the link, but in fact, you will also have it in the PDF version I've given you. All right, now let's hear from McWhorter. Time to hear from McWhorter's view and so forth. And so we will hear from de Graaf later, but let's first. Here again, it's not a YouTube video, it's a podcast. And I've got the link here, but also the QR code. So this this video was quite good in presenting in McWhorter's presentation. So let's listen.
So yeah, can you describe what a Creole language is? Because I hadn't heard about this before I listened to your lectures, and it's super fascinating, and I imagine many audience members have not heard of them.
Oh, Creoles are really fascinating. It's the closest thing to language starting again. What happens is that, let's say there's some situation where somebody learns another language only partially. You know, a few hundred words, some shards of grammar. That's frankly what most of us do in school. Suppose you have that, but for some reason you end up having to live in that. And you're with a whole bunch of other people who've learned the language to that level, speaking probably a few different languages, and you're not going to default to any of them. Like, you don't know Polish, the Polish person doesn't know English. And all of you speak this low level, say, German or Russian. And the situation is that you're going to live in that language, talking to each other in that language forever. What happens is not that everybody just stays speaking with a 300-word lingo. What happens is that people naturally expand it by using the words, by using bits of grammar from their native languages, and you fill it out into this brand new language, and that's a Creole. Often you hear that it's children who turn it into a Creole, but the truth is, if you look around the world, grown-ups can go a very long way towards expanding a pidgin, as you call it, into a real language, a Creole, as you call it. And the truth is that situation happened most in the previous millennium under conditions like slavery, orphanage, labor, military conscription. It was people who for some reason, were in the frankly rather eldritch situation of speaking a language badly and needing to make it into a real language. So a lot of these languages were born in tragedy, an awful lot of them with plantation slavery, for example. But the result is a brand new language. And these are languages that are less gunked up with the needless complexities that languages that are older have. And so it's not that they are, absolutely elementary, but they show that they've only existed for a few hundred years. They don't challenge you with a whole lot of nonsense in that way. And there are several dozen Creole languages spoken around the world. There is some controversy in linguistics over whether Creoles start as pidgins and their language is born anew, or whether Creoles are just what happens when languages mix together and there's no reason to think of them as anything different. I believe the first version. That was what people thought about Creoles until about 20 years ago. And to be very glib, I think that the linguists who think that Creoles are just what happens when two languages meet are wrong. I have to say that, but I'm not going to pretend that they do not have their say as well. But Creoles are much more interesting than that. And so Haitian Creole and the Creoles of Suriname in South America, like Saramaccan, that's the one that I have most studied. Slaves escaped from plantations into the rainforest, and their descendants live there today, speaking the new language that these people created. And Cape Verdean Portuguese, that's a Creole. There are many Creoles in Australia and surrounding Oceania. They're very interesting languages, but they tend to be non-standardized. They tend to be spoken alongside some big fat monster language. And so it's easy not to know that they exist, but they are some of the newest languages in the world. And, I find them mesmerizing.
So this is kind of language born afresh, borrowing vocabulary and some grammatical aspects from the languages that these adults originally spoke or their native languages when they were forced together as adults. Let's give a couple of examples, I guess, of the kinds of things that get stripped away in these languages. So I guess, in most Indo-European languages, including Spanish and English, or I guess Spanish and French and so on, you have gender. So you have like noun categories, masculine and feminine and so on. That's if you have a Creole based on Spanish, that's going to go almost certainly.
That's one of the first things, right?
And it's because adults, when they're putting together this language, trying to communicate with one another, it's like, why would you add that in? Basically, there is no reason.
It's not necessary.
It's not necessary.
Exactly.
They're just trying to communicate, and these noun categories aren't helping. I guess, most non-Creole languages have lots of different tenses, like I did, I had done, I had done, like I was doing, all of these different, like many different past tenses.
Actually, a Creole will have a lot of that sort of thing.
Really? Okay.
But it'll do it with one word. So what the Creole will get rid of is the long list of endings, depending on whether it's I or we or they. That goes. But there will be a difference between I was going and I am going and I went. But it's with one suffix, or usually it'll be with one separate word. And so you can get across that nuance, but without the nonsense of it changing because of whether it's we or you or he or she.
I see. Okay, so they don't necessarily shrink the number of tenses, but they're easier to form because the irregularities are stripped away.
Precisely.
Interesting. Yeah. Are there any other kind of classic things that disappear as a language as a Creole is born?
Yeah, those things are very important because they are what make learning, for example, European languages hard. And then also another thing that gets stripped away is if you are a tonal language where it's like Chinese, where the tone determines what the word is just on one syllable, that is something that gets undone in what's called creolization because that's really hard to learn. And if you're going to create a language anew, why would you start it that way? So that sort of thing has to kind of creep in gradually all over again, but you strip that away. And you get rid of things like the word understand, where you know what under is, you know what stand is, but what are you standing under? Or something like everybody turned out. Well, did they turn? In what sense did they rotate? We don't think about that. But that sort of thing has to start all over again in a Creole. Words are more transparent in that sense because you've just gotten it down to a collection of 100 and you're trying to make 300 or 400. You're trying to make as much sense as possible. So Creole languages do not have the grammar of Esperanto. It's not that grammar disappears to that extent. But then on the other hand, a Creole language's structure is much less gunked up. And so, for example, Haitian Creole is very much a real language. You have to learn grammatical rules, and it's got, vocabulary way, 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 way beyond 600 or 700 words. It's now tens of thousands. But it's still true that Haitian Creole is French, but with all of the things that make French hard to learn stripped away because people, frankly, had better things to do.
Yeah.
And so it's a much easier language to learn the basics of.
So they're much easier to learn than lingua francas like English, and much, much easier to learn than languages that were never lingua francas, like, I don't know, Welsh or Hungarian or Iroquois or whatever. But does this much greater simplicity, this much greater ease and streamlining come at much or any cost to comprehension or, functional communication between its speakers?
No, it's interesting. What functional communication between speakers and expressiveness in general are all about a language having what are called constructions. So you've got words, you've got basic grammar, you've got expressions like, what are you doing here? Or the longer, the better. If you think about it, the longer, the better, that doesn't necessarily have to mean what it means. Mm-hmm. We just know that we just know that. That's called a construction. Mm-hmm. What are you doing here, you say? And you're watching the person doing it. What you mean is, why are you here? That's something that you pick up. All languages have a massive collection of that. Where the shit hits the fan is that languages differ in how much of the hablo, hablas, habla, hablamos, hablais, hablan that you have. All of the verb conjugations, the meaningless grammatical gender, the verbs that change shape for no reason, like am, are, been, be, all of that stuff. There's some languages that have almost none of that. There's some languages that have way too much of that. Yeah. And that is where you get the needless kind of complexity. You can have a language that has none of what I just described, and you are the same human being communicating with all the nuance of the person who's got lots of it. That lots of it is like the cans dragging behind a car after a wedding. And yet, it's so fascinating, but it's not needed.
So when I was listening to your lectures on creoles, it's like, okay, so you've got these languages that are way easier to learn, much more regular, much more streamlined. It comes at no cost to communication as far as anyone can tell. It turns out that, marking the gender of pronouns, not helpful. It turns out that all of these subtleties of tenses, context takes care of it. None of it was necessary, like, marking whether this object is moving or who owns it and how they own it and how they know something. All of this stuff.
You have listened to my lectures.
More than once in some cases. All of those things, gratuitous to actual communication. Aren't creoles the best languages? They're cheaper and just as good.
I should have put it that way many years ago, and I would have made fewer creolists angry. Yeah, they are the best languages in that way because they're not gunked up with stuff that make them difficult for second language learners to learn. And in terms of efficiency, in an aesthetic sense, you could say that they are very much that because there just isn't all this stuff. And yet, what's interesting is to see that those languages are very much real languages. If you wanted to have a universal language, ideally, you would choose a Creole because they are much easier to learn than languages that have been around for a while getting all gunked up. Yeah, Creoles are better. And what's interesting is that the ones that are forming now tend to be sign languages. Sign languages form in that way too. They start as pidgins and then they become Creoles in a sense. But that's less accessible to the rest of us, who are hearing people. But it's that same process. Sign languages are better in that way because they aren't gunked up because they tend to be young. Yeah, definitely. I would put it that way.
Yeah. Just before we finish this, I'll just say one other thing is I was amazed that Creoles form basically within one, maybe two generations. You throw together people who don't have a common language, they will produce a full language, a fully functional language with all of the words they need and all of the grammar. Sometimes in the first generation, or if not, then their children will all speak this language, which is just incredible. How, I think it speaks to, so people want to communicate, and if the language doesn't have a function, they just add it, and then they all kind of agree on it very quickly, and it appears just like that. It's beautiful.
It's funny how quickly it does seem to happen. It does seem to happen in one generation. And, if I were going to make a movie of it, I suppose for drama's sake, I would have it being that the first generation of toddlers all of a sudden are speaking much more fluently and quickly than the grown-ups. But truth is, the grown-ups can do it too. There would be drama in watching teenagers and grown-ups gradually getting to the point that they can have a real conversation, because that's exactly what happened, for example, in Australia and Oceania. You have to reconstruct it for the plantation Creoles. You have to guess, but all evidence is that that's the way it happened there too. Then the kids come, and it's already a real language. The kids make it a real language, but it isn't as dramatic as one might think, because even the grown-ups, to be a human being is to want to do better than me sit under tree. You want more, and you create it. Yeah, that's what people do.
Yeah, and I think it's the same thing that makes people talk about that. They worry that English is going to degrade or languages are going to degrade. It's basically not possible, because if it isn't serving our purpose, we just fix it. We just add words. We just disambiguate.
When
you couldn't make language
breaks,
degrade if you wanted to.
No, even if you wanted that to happen, you would end up subconsciously resisting it. When language breaks, we fix it. Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, when you watch that video, you almost feel like, wow, Creoles are the best thing ever. And why don't we all speak a Creole? And why do we need these other lingua francas? We can have Creoles. Let me again sort of reinforce the points that I would like you to take away from the video. I did see here one is chat. I'm trying to see. I can't seem to get it. Can I just ask at this point, are we all good? Can someone let me know? Are you hearing everything, seeing everything okay?
Yes, everything is okay.
Okay, thank you for that reassurance. Okay, let's continue. Today, I'm not going to give a break, all right? I'm just going to go through everything. And at the end, there will not be discussion. We're not in that setting. So no discussion groups. I'm going to give you some discussion questions. I'd like you to sort of take those away and think about it. But this week, no discussion sections. No, you don't need to email me your discussion notes and like that. This week, you're off for that. Okay, so you can breathe easily. But so I'm going to go through some of the points now, and we'll carry on. Creoles happened under conditions like slavery, military conscription. People who, for some reason, were in a rather strange situation of speaking a language badly, needing to make it into a real language. Pidgin Creoles born in tragedy. Important point, but this result is a brand new language. So McWhorter spins this as very positive. Yeah, it came from out of tragedy, came out of a very bad situation, slave plantations and so on. But the end result is something remarkable. And these languages are less gunked up. I like that expression that he uses, with all the needless complexities that older languages have. It's not that they are elementary. Now, this is an important point, because this is where he will be criticized, and that is that if you're saying that these languages go through a process like from a pidgin that is simplified and so forth, and so these are simple languages, no, that's not his point. They develop, they expand, they have other ways to deal with it other than through inflectional affixes, other than through tone, other than through lexicalization, and so on. Now, there is some controversy in linguistics over whether Creoles start as pidgins, McWhorter's view, and their language is born anew, all right, newly born languages, or whether Creoles happen when language mixes together. So not very exceptional, all right? Two languages in contact, they mix together, they result in a Creole. They're not really different at all. Linguists who think that Creoles are just what happens when two languages meet, well, McWhorter's view, they are wrong. Who's wrong? Well, he would say Michel de Graaf, Mufwini. They are wrong. There are many Creoles in Australia surrounding Oceania. They are non-standardized. They tend to be spoken alongside some big fat monster language. This is a kind of language born afresh. A Creole is born afresh. He keeps repeating that idea, borrowing vocabulary, some grammatical aspects from the language that these adults originally spoke. Languages have a lot of different tenses, you know, like I did, I had done, I had. Well, a Creole, not, this was the important point that the guy, when he was talking to John McWhorter, uh, there's no tense. No. Creoles distinguish tenses, but they'll do it another way. They won't do it with an affix. They may do it with one word. They get rid of the endings. They don't necessarily shrink the number of tenses. They're easier to form because the irregularities are stripped away. Haitian Creole, very much a real language. Haitian Creole is French, but with all the things that make French hard to learn stripped away because people, frankly, had better things to do. So what gets stripped away? Verb conjugations, meaningless grammatical gender, the verbs that change shape for no reason, like the verb to be, I am, you are, been, be. You can have a language that has none of what I just described, and you are the same human being communicating with all the nuances of the person who's got lots of it. That's a very important point. Just because you don't have, go back, verb conjugations, just because you don't have grammatical gender, just because you don't have verbs that change shape for no reason, that does not mean that you are any less of a human being with a less of an awareness and a cognition and so forth. You can have a language that's none of what he just was describing, and you are the same human being communicating with all the nuances of the person who's got those things. So in the end, he's saying Creoles, well, they are the best languages. They're not gunked up with stuff that makes them difficult for second language learners to learn. In fact, he's saying if you wanted to have a universal language, ideally, you choose a Creole. They're much easier to learn than languages that have been around for all that time, getting all gunked up. He talks about sign languages. Sign languages, his point is they start as pigeons, then they become Creoles. Sign languages are better because they aren't gunked up, because they tend to be young. He goes on to say this, throw together people who don't have a common language, they will produce a full language, a fully functional language with all the words they need. Okay, that's McWhorter's view. Very positive. They are the best languages. They're young, they're born anew, they've resulted from a pigeon, so they got rid of all these things that are unnecessary in a language and are just the result of these old languages over time adding on and making them all gunked up. Okay, that's one side. That's McWhorter's view. There's another view. Creoles don't come from pigeons. What is argued by DeGraff is at MIT, McClaney is University of Chicago. McWhorter, by the way, is University of Columbia at New York. Creoles don't come from pigeons, that it's been somehow scientifically proven that Creoles don't start from something that isn't a language. To think Creoles come from pigeons is uninformed in a scientific way, faintly colonialist or racist. And of course, it's a short step from there to racist. This is what McWhorter said. All right. Michel DeGraff, he gave this lecture. It was titled Linguists' Most Dangerous Myth, the Fallacy of Creole Exceptionalism. Okay, here's the link. It's on YouTube. Here's the QR code with a link to the video. Again, I've taken part of the video, what I consider to be important. If you get the video and look at it online, you will see it does go longer than what I have here. This is a very different view, very different argument. But I'll tell you, you can see that it's very deeply felt. What Michel de Graaf is saying in this video is Creole exceptionalism has deprived, may still be depriving the world of a wealth of empirical and theoretical insights about Creole languages and about language in general, ultimately weakening the scientific foundations of linguistics. Wow, very strong. Worse yet, neo-colonial, exceptionalist Creolistics, especially within Creole communities, eventually infringes on the human rights of Creole speakers. Wow, he's taken it to a whole different level, okay? On the one hand, he's saying it is unscientific. In fact, it is weakening the scientific foundations of linguistics. Secondly, he's saying that it is infringing on the human rights of Creole speakers. This is strong words. The most powerful tool of domination, again, I'm quoting de Graaf, the most powerful tool of domination, both actual and symbolic, is the school system, which in much of the Caribbean still devalues Creole languages. Even in Haiti, where the vast majority of Haitians speak only Haitian Creole, where all Haitians speak Haitian Creole, where Haitian Creole is the official language on par with French. He's saying the school systems, they devalue the Creole languages. Kids go to the school in Haiti, they're required to use French, not the Creole, not Haitian Creole, even though it is, as even McWhorter described, Haitian Creole is French, but with all those extra added ons, all the gunking up, gone. And what de Graaf is saying is, all the Haitians, they speak Haitian Creole. It is the official language of Haiti, on par with French. So how come the school requires them to learn French and know Haitian Creole?
Bonsoir, moi c'est professeur Michel de Graaf. M'a enseigné linguistique dans MIT, ça fait plus passer 25 l'année. So now please raise your hand if you understand Haitian Creole. One, two, okay. So now for those of you who don't speak Creole, imagine for a second how it would feel if I were to keep speaking in Creole, although I know you don't understand at all. How would you feel? Yeah, frustrated, right? Well, that's exactly what happens to 40% of children all around the world, and especially black and brown children like me in the post-colonies of the world. And so what happens is that they're being taught, actually mistaught and failed by teachers who speak in a foreign language. This is me when I used to be cute. So imagine yourself as a cute child like me being punished, even beaten for speaking your home language. The language that surrounds you, that you breathe in, that you feel in, and that was my reality as a good Catholic boy in Haiti, where Creole was excluded. It was devalorized as quote-unquote broken French. In Haiti, there are even schools where they post signs like these that say, I must always speak French, otherwise I am the gorilla of the class. Imagine. But why is this happening? Why are we suppressing our ancestral and home languages that carry our culture, our history, our identity? Well, in this talk, I will start by giving you some answers, but I'm going to start with my own journey to reclaim my native language, Creole. The journey actually started long before I was born, in 1492, when Columbus got lost in what was then Haiti. Columbus was aware of the power of language. So the first thing it did in Haiti, it changed the name of the island into Hispaniola. Haiti's inhabitants, the Tainos, were quickly enslaved, then decimated. Now, fast forward to 1697, when the western part of Hispaniola was ceded to France and became Saint-Domingue. Saint-Domingue is where the French built the most profitable plantation economy in the world. And they did that on the backs of enslaved Africans from various groups: the Igbos, the Fongbes, the Congos, the Eways, and others. And Saint-Domingue really became what was then known as the Pearl of the Caribbean, because it was the largest producer of sugar in the world, and it was responsible for 1/3 of European trade in the 18th century. Now, in 1791, that pearl came crashing down because the enslaved Africans revolted, which led to January 1st, 1804, when Haiti became the first free black nation in the Americas. And now you should be asking, how did the Africans, who came from so many diverse linguistic groups, speaking Igbo, Congo, Ewe, etc., how did they manage to unite against the French? There was no Google Translate. There was no ChatGPT. How did they do it? Well, the answer lies in the power of language, because at that time, there was an emerging lingua franca that later became known as Creole or Haitian Creole. And here, one of our major leaders for this fight for freedom, Jean-Jacques Dessalines, he too understood the power of language for nation building. He advocated the use of Creole as langue à nous, our own language, instead of French. Our Act of Independence was written in French, but the text itself was very much aware of the power of language, because there Dessalines said that the Africans had been victims not only of French military might, they had also been victims of what Dessalines called the eloquence of French agents. And then came two very tragic events within 20 years. In 1806, Dessalines was killed, and then in 1825, France did at last recognize Haitian independence, but they did so by making Haiti pay, through gunboat diplomacy, 150 million gold francs. So there was an agreement that Haiti had to pay that amount for Haiti to be recognized as independent. So this ransom, which is worth today more than $21 billion, also included, guess what? The very value of the bodies of the enslaved Africans, which the French in 1825 still considered as the lost furniture. Literally, the Code Noir declared that the Africans were furniture. This ransom is at the root of Haiti's impoverishment throughout the 18th, 19th, 20th, and 21st century. Historian Marlene Doe has called this ransom the greatest heist in history, $21 billion. And then in 1915, Haiti suffers an acute and chronic event. The US invades and occupies the country for 19 years. One of the first actions of the US in Haiti was to, guess what? Steal the gold reserves in Haiti's national bank, adding insult to the injury of the French ransom. Now, let's take a closer look at how the power of language has played a crucial role in France's neocolonialism in Haiti. In case that 1825 ransom was not enough to cripple Haiti forever, the French consul at the time, Gaspard Théodore Maulien, he saw an opportunity to further expand French influence through the deployment of French teachers and priests. Maulien was determined to make Haiti entirely dependent on France, and he knew that language and education were key factors for achieving that goal. So you should ask, did Maulien and his successors succeed? Let's find out. Let's fast forward to the 20th century, when Maulien's tactics have become enshrined in France's global francophonie movement. For example, the French president Giscard d'Estaing in the 70s, like it was for Maulien in the 19th century, he understood that the French language is to be used as a powerful tool for France's political and economic domination. Now, fast forward to Haiti in the 21st century. This is a very small sample to show the ways in which both French and Haitian authorities including Haitian media, have worked hand in hand to suppress the use of Creole in avenues of power, not just in Haiti, but throughout the Caribbean. Most recently, in 2021, French Ambassador Fabrice Mauriès made a statement that was nearly identical to what you heard from Consul Molien in 1825. He wants France to have most influence in Haiti. Of course, this is for the benefit of France, even though the Haitian elites themselves, they call French language and culture their own, quote, war bounty, butin de guerre. That's the way that Haitian elites call French in Haiti. The French themselves called it soft power. Well, that's brutal power, killing us softly. And French politicians, from Molien to Mauriès, are not alone in the use of language for power. Linguists themselves, in my own field, have been instrumental in the creation of what Frederick Douglass called grades of humanity. Grades of humanity with Creole speakers at the bottom of the pit, starting as early as in the 18th century. Now, this is a quick sample through 4 centuries. 1785, Creole is for species that lack intelligence. 1889, Creole languages are for inferior races. 1982, perhaps that's the most striking quote, Creole languages are linguistic fossils, which means that when I started speaking Creole to you at first, my mind would have reverted back to a primitive state, right? That's what it means, that when I speak Creole, I go back to the earliest dawn of humanity, like a gorilla, really. And now this is 2001, and even the New York Times, the venerable New York Times, claim in an interview with John McWhorter, imagine that Creoles are the most primitive languages in the whole world. But we Haitians can reclaim the power of our language. And that's exactly what I've been doing for more than 30 years, including here at MIT. As you can see on this slide, most of my work is about Creole and in Creole, including work on linguistics, debunking bogus claims against my language. I even have a couple of papers that are explicitly about the power of Creole for learning to read, and the power of Creole for liberation. But you might be asking, how did I get from there in Haiti, where Creole speakers are rendered powerless, to here at MIT, where most of my work relies on the power of Creole? And that's a very long story, but I'll excerpt 2 parts. One about computation, and the other one about re-education. So that's the part about computation. So this is where my first epiphany happened in the 80s through computation, when I worked as an intern at Bell Labs as a computer scientist with linguists and AI researchers developing early speech recognition and text-to-speech systems. It's then that I discovered that the kind of rules, linguistic rules, that apply to English, French, Arabic, and so on, also applies straightforwardly to my native Creole. It was aha. This realization led me to understand that Creole is indeed a perfectly normal language, and this sparked my interest in linguistics and Creole studies. My second epiphany happened in Haiti. At that school in the 90s, founded by my late colleague and friend, Yves Desjean. It's a school called Saint-Ouen-Tiflet, in English, Three Little Flowers Center. And this is where, for the first time ever, I witnessed kids learning in Creole with joy and pride, a stark contrast with what I experienced myself as a child learning in French. So these epiphanies have led me to the founding in 2010 of the MIT Haiti Initiative with Dr. Vijay Kumar of MIT Open Learning, thanks to initial funding from the National Science Foundation and to the brilliance and solidarity of many amazing colleagues and students at MIT, in Haiti, in the Asian diaspora. At MIT Haiti, we do remember Jean-Jacques Dessalines, and we use Creole to unshackle Haitian minds from centuries of intellectual and cultural ransoms. This unlocking of human potential is the basic rationale for MIT Haiti. We engage in direct action to open up access to quality education. We've developed a model to replace the stale French-based system that has failed most Haitian children to date, keeping Haiti in misery for centuries. So the improved system that we're building is based on 3 pillars, or in Creole, 3 roches d'effet, and all 3 backed by science: active learning, adapted technology, and Creole as language for instruction. And our efforts have resulted in positive changes in attitudes towards Creole and also in classroom practices. So that's a call for action here.
Okay, so when we look at what DeGraff is saying, you can feel the sensitivity that he has because of his life experience of having been sort of told that Creole speakers are less intelligent, less capable. Their language is primitive. This has resulted in him, in many ways, trying to react against that. So what he's talking about are these anti-Creole myths. Creole languages result from the adaptation of a language to the phonetic and grammatical genius of a race that is linguistically inferior. But yes, these are insulting views. Creole is an imbecile jargon for a species of human beings that lack intelligence. Creole languages are the missing linguistic fossils, the equivalent of the Galapagos to Darwin. So what he's reacting against is these insults to the language that he speaks, to Haitian Creole. So what is the response? The response is that this language, this Haitian Creole, is not the result of some simplification. It is not the result of some pidginization. It is a real, full language, never been less. But he's coming at it from a very ideological perspective to dismiss what would be considered to be evidence that would favor the view that Haitian Creole is the result of a pidginization, result from that simple use of a pidgin that develops over time into a Creole. Now, remember, what John McWhorter was saying was not in any way to insult Creoles, not to say that they are in some way considered to the speakers of Creole should be considered somehow less intelligent, primitive, like they're somewhere lower down in the evolution scale. I go back to the earliest dawn of humanity, like a gorilla. That, you see, that's what is sort of prompting this reaction, very strong reaction to the idea of Creoles being exceptional, like exceptional in a bad way. When what McWhorter is arguing, they are exceptional in a good way. They are languages born anew. They are languages less gunked up. They are this sort of miracle of what human beings can do in a situation when they come together with different languages. So what he is arguing, though, is also prompted in many ways by what has been France's colonial intentions with respect to promoting French, sending French teachers, sending French priests. And what they want, what he is arguing for is in school, especially in schools, it should not be French-based, but should be Haitian Creole-based. You know, we almost go back to last week, right? Because it becomes very much not a linguistic issue. It becomes, yes, truly a sociolinguistic issue. It becomes very social. It becomes very much related to the aspect of one's national identity, how one is perceived by others. What McWhorter's argument back to DeGraff is that it isn't that Creoles have too little of anything, it's that older languages have too much. And structural differentials between languages, including ones of complexity, have nothing to do with cognitive sophistication. This is what McWhorter is saying, is to say that a Creole derived from a pidgin, gone through those steps, what it has become is a language in the full sense. Nothing less. Okay, one more video I want to show you before we conclude. And I know it's about 11:19 now. Please watch this last video with me. I think it is sort of McWhorter's response directly to what DeGraff is saying.
The Creole debate is addressing what I'm afraid is becoming a new orthodoxy, certainly among most people who study Creoles, but at this point, among other linguists, which is an idea that Creoles don't come from pigeons, that it's been somehow scientifically proven that Creoles don't start as something that isn't a language, that Creoles aren't language born again, with the understanding being that to think Creoles come from pigeons is uninformed in a scientific way, and also maybe faintly colonialist, as some have put it, and of course there's a short step from there to racist. And so the idea is that Haitian is not some interesting or exotic departure from what an ordinary Romance language is, and the only reason that we think it is because we don't understand how languages change, we don't understand how Latin became French, and we're just thinking of it as different because poor, subjugated black people speak it. That is a very interesting thesis, and it's important for linguists to check their biases. But I think that to take all of that to the extreme of saying that Creole languages are not properly a kind of language at all, except in terms of a certain specific colonial history that most of those languages have, I don't think it's true. I don't think that it's empirically accurate. And the way the debate has been conducted, and the fact that I think all of us deeply fear being racists, and I think that's important, means that I think a critical mass of people are beginning to actually accept that there's no such thing as a Creole. And I won't have that, because for one thing, I have devoted 30 years of my life to studying these languages, and I like to think that my life had some kind of point. And more to it, they are a kind of language for scientifically delineable reasons. And it's occurred to me lately that not too many people know that I've even made a case, or that my colleagues, such as Mikhail Parkval and Peter Bakker, have made a similar case. So I realized that there needs to be something between two covers that makes the point, and that's why I wrote The Creole Debate. Creole exceptionalism started out as a slur applied by Michel de Graff at ideas like mine. I heartily embrace that slur. Creoles are exceptional. They are different. They are neonates. That's what makes them interesting. Creole exceptionalism says that you can tell that a language is a Creole based on its synchronic state, that it's not just a matter of knowing its social history, that even if you didn't, you could tell that most of the languages that are called Creoles were born probably a few centuries ago of pigeons. And I have tried to make a case that there are three features which, when combined, are indicative of birth in a pigeon. And what's very interesting is that many people have said over the years that that idea of mine has been somehow disproven. But the facts are very simple. In 21 years, no one has ever shown me a language that didn't have a history in extensive adult acquisition that combined those three features. So many people will tell you, oh no, exceptions have been found, and ask them and look at their face. Nobody has ever presented an exception. So Creole exceptionalism is a thesis devoted to showing that when a language is born as a pigeon, the result, even hundreds of years later, is a language where you can tell that that was how it was born. And furthermore, that looking at today's 7,000 languages, you can single out which ones were born in that way, because it would be impossible in terms of how diachronic linguistics works for any older language to have that particular state. And so the details are about inflectional morphology and about uses of tone, and also about opaque derivation in the sense of saying something like understand, which is utterly and completely unpredictable from the combination of under and stand. Or another example, in English that we use a word like make up, all the different things that make up means in terms of putting something on your face, in terms of reconciling with someone, in terms of creating something out of whole cloth. Most of those meanings aren't predictable from the combination of the word make and the combination of the word up in any sense. That sort of thing in a certain small subset of the world's languages is vanishingly rare to non-existent. That's another one of these three features. So Creole exceptionalism is a thesis that Creoles are exceptional.
Okay, Creole exceptionalism is a thesis devoted to showing that when a language is born as a pidgin, the result, even hundreds of years later, is a language where you can tell that that was how it was born. Looking at today's 7,000 languages, you can single out which ones were born in that way, because it would be impossible in terms of how diachronic linguistics works for any older languages to have that particular state. Now, I would like you to be thinking about the two arguments that are being presented here. On the one hand, de Graaf is saying that the view that McWhorter is saying is has sort of colonialist, racist ideology behind it, but I don't think that's the case. I don't think that argument stands, as you can see from McWhorter's own response. In fact, the argument should be decided on the basis of the evidence, the linguistic evidence, and yes, the socio-historical context. To bring in the idea that if you follow McWhorter's view, you're racist, and to sort of insult the view that he holds because of de Graaf's experience with having been sort of struggling with how he has been treated and how those who speak Haitian Creole have been treated by the French historically, and in terms of how the speakers of Haitian Creole have been sort of subjugated to insult. To react against that, I don't think then the argument should fall on that basis. That if you adopt McWhorter's view, you're racist. No, I think we're going in the wrong direction there in terms of the discussion. It should be based on the evidence. One bit of evidence that, and I'm not going to play this video. I'd like you. There's a video that is here. I didn't plan to show it. It is in fact de Graaf at MIT in a tutorial. He has about 10 or 12 students. They're sitting around a table, and the students are asking questions. And I found it interesting because, you see, de Graaf's one of his arguments against McWhorter is, okay, where's the evidence? I don't see that pidgin that created Haitian Creole. I only see Haitian Creole. I don't see that pidgin. How come nobody ever, noted down the pidgin? How come there's no historical record related to that pidgin? Well, that is really you can't argue on that basis. I mean, that the people didn't historically record the pidgin, which they probably considered to be insignificant and sort of a fleeting kind of thing. So one of the students in this tutorial asked that question to de Graaf, and de Graaf sort of, you can listen to his argument back. I think it would be interesting. We're not going to have tutorial as usual today. We're not going to have our discussion. But the one thing that I would like you to do is I'd like you to take this video, and here's the QR code, and here's the URL if you want that. And sometime, please go to listen to it. And I'd like you to see the reaction of de Graaf when this student poses this question: is it really reasonable to argue that there's no evidence? And you can see de Graaf's response and his reaction. I thought it would be interesting for not only for the sake of the argument that's being discussed here, but also just to see and observe what is happening in an MIT tutorial conducted by Michel DeGraff. So today, what we have been talking about, what is a pidgin? What is a Creole? What is Creole exceptionalism? So what are some positive aspects of Creoles? What are some negative aspects of Creoles? Think about these things, okay? And it's not for discussion. You don't need to write me any notes about it. I would welcome if any of you have any questions related to today's discussion or some thoughts related to today's discussion. Please, yeah, I would welcome hearing from you for that. But it's up to you. If I would welcome an exchange, a dialogue on these issues if you'd like. Okay. So, well, I'm always available anyways. You have my email and you can contact me with any questions or comments or criticisms and whatever. All right. So please feel free to do so. I'm going to stop it there. Thank you for attending today. As I've said, I'm recording it. I sure hope I'm recording it. And the video will be available later for anyone who wasn't here today. I hope that you all stay safe. I'm looking out my window right now and see it still raining and blowing quite hard. So I hope you all stay inside safe and sound and take it as a good opportunity to do some studying. Okay. All right. So I'm going to say goodbye. And next week, not next week, next week, we have again, a holiday, October 1st. So please have a good rest and I'll see you in 2 weeks' time.